Hi, my name is Melissa Carrick. Welcome back to the third episode of Ad Libitum Rest, short series based on experience of overcoming injury as a musician. In the first and second episodes, we talked about common injuries among musicians and about warning signs of potential chronic condition/injury. If you missed it and you want to watch it, you can just go to the link that is below in the comments. As difficult as the physical part of my recovery process was, I think the mental part was much harder. When something like this happens in the life of a professional musician, it's very hard to imagine your future, to imagine your professional career in your field with an injury as severe as this one was. It took many conversations with my professors, with my colleagues, with physical therapists to begin to realize that I'm not alone in this process. For me, it was very helpful to hear these different stories about injuries and recovery process because, it gave me some kind of hope that one day I will be fine.
Recovery does not mean the complete absence of pain and the complete return to full functioning.
It's not a straight line towards recovery, not at all. It's like everything is like domino effect. Like my injury started feeling better, but because that part of my hand had been injured for so long, the other parts were weak. So I would start having other injuries in other parts because they had been weakened.
When I went to see Dr. Charnas, the doctor that treated me, when he told me that I wasn't allowed to play for the rest of the summer, it was totally devastating to me. And I also remember I wasn't allowed to practice, right? And earlier in my life, I would have been like, yay, I can't practice. But I remember going into the room in my house where I practiced growing up and just like opening my case so I could look at my viola. And it was like so depressing. I couldn't play it. And it was that summer that I realized that I wanted to be a musician.
I had a psychologist that I respect very much who I was seeing who asked me the question. He said, what's the worst case scenario? If you can imagine yourself in a situation where you don't have the career path you thought you'd have, or you dreamed of having, or you wanted to have, if you can imagine that and then imagine happiness in that other path, in any other path, if you can imagine the worst case scenario being okay, it opens up a lot of freedom to think, you know what? If I could cope with the worst case scenario, I can cope with anything that's better than that. And for me, that was a big thing, to have freedom to start to, be a little bit more creative with recovery and not feel the strain and the stress on having it happen now.
All I really needed was for someone to say, this is normal. Like, this isn't, this is what the body does. You're not made out of like metal. Like, your body is going to react to things, and that's okay.
One other thing that I think relates to that that's really important is, and it took a long time for me to get past this. I had an injury. That injury very certainly cost me the job in San Diego. That I know for a fact. And so I dreamt of that job. It's a great city, great orchestra. It's like, an ideal situation. So I had physical sensations that have associations with some level of traumatic experience for me. So for a long time, anytime I felt that physical sensation or a precursor to that sensation, it led me into this cycle of catastrophic thinking. Oh, you're giving the brain the association. Last time I had that sensation, or once I had that sensation, it cost me something really important in my life. I have that sensation again now. Shit, is it going to cost me something else really important to me?
You have to picture yourself like, okay, look, I can do those motions. I can do this. And I'm doing this day in, day out. You can't focus on something that it's not real. You're focusing on something, what if, we can always step outside and split and fall down, what if, but it's not what if, you're doing it. It's not something that you're not able to do and you try to do something extreme.
Yoga and meditation cultivate the space in between action and reaction. And I was noticing like very quickly that I was able to, not detach emotionally, but really control my frustration or anger or sadness. I was slowly beginning to cultivate this space where I could choose, how to react to what I was feeling.
And also you have to understand, sometimes, like you said, sometimes you feel better than the other time. You have to understand that everything has impact, especially is any medical condition, any injury. It's going to be more sensitive if something happened to yourself during the day. For example, if you had a bad night's sleep, your hands might be more stiff. If you had a lot of stress, the weakest part of the body, you're going to feel it. So that's why I'm saying mind and body are very connected, even though sometimes we don't think about it.
Having an outside like perspective from a professional, I don't know what I would have done without it, but something that I felt was like life altering and never going to get better. It was what my physical therapist, it's what she does every day at work. And she's like, this is no big deal. Like, this is life. This is what I do. Trust me.
And letting go of whatever the past is and using the practice room as a real laboratory to experiment with any number of different ways of doing things in order to refine a process in a way where it will be easier than it was.
I would distract myself. I would, go to concerts and I would hang out with my friends. And I think it's really important because you don't want your whole life to become about it.
Well, first of all, usually patients, they always kind of bring what they cannot do. I always bring them what they can do. They don't have a control of stuff they cannot do. They have a control of the stuff they can do. So that's something they have to work around.
Reactions and discomfort and pain is a normal part of recovery and rehabilitation, but success and progress can be quantified with the recognition that doing more with less of a response is a positive place for us to move into.
You gradually progress, you gradually exercise, because if you think too far ahead, it's just, again, your mind is going to start playing and you're going to start being desperate. And when we're desperate, you're going to try to push yourself to the extreme, thinking like, oh, if I do more of this, then I'll get better. It doesn't work that way.
What worked yesterday might not work today. So in yoga, you're always really encouraged to just be in the now. And it sounds so cliche, but the more we can tap into like what is true in this moment, usually we realize that actually much more is okay than not.
Because I was in school while it happened, every single day I was so aware of what I was missing. Like every day, like I sit in the back during orchestra. I sit without my instrument during quartet rehearsal. I go to my lesson and don't play a note. So like every day there was evidence in front of my eyes of things that I was not able to do. And that is the most motivating, maybe not always in a healthy way.
So every time when I started having those negative thoughts and having those panic and anxiety attacks, I would just wake myself up and just say, okay, what can I do right now in this moment to make this situation better and to help myself?
The way we speak to ourselves can make all the difference in the world.
I really think that if I had not gotten tendonitis, I don't know if I would have gone into music. I don't know if I would have had that realization until much later. So I feel like at the time, tendonitis was the worst thing that had ever happened to me, but I also continue to feel like it's the best thing that ever happened. seems there's this huge stigma around being injured, right? It's like if you're injured, either like you're weak and you can't like deal with it, or it's all in your head. I heard that many times, like, oh, you're just imagining it, it's not real.
Like if you think about the act of sharing music with others, we're expected to be totally technically proficient, really musical, to somehow like have it all together and remain like cool as a cucumber in order to get up on stage, yet also like bearing our souls. Like it's insane. It's a huge amount to ask, like physically, psychologically, and no wonder musicians get injured.
You know what? I have new constraints that I didn't have in my life before. And I have to honor those constraints and work within them in order to be able to get past them.
But what was helpful was my professor or my colleague saying, how are you feeling today? What can we do today? What would be helpful to work on now? And not being like, when are you going to be better? Next week? 2 weeks? When can we rehearse? A month from now? 2 months from now?